you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.
Welcome to Vital Signs, your prescription for a healthy family, where members of the Catholic Medical Association explore medical topics vital to the health of you and your family members. I'm Dr. Tom McGovern, the host of Vital Signs, brought to you by Shalom World TV. Today we explore a topic that's uncomfortable for many, talking about death and dying with your family members, whether or not you have a family member who's expected to die soon. Learning how to prepare for the loss of a relative will bear fruit when you are faced with the impending loss of a loved one. In 2017 in the United States, dying at home became more common than dying in a hospital for the first time in nearly a century. Nevertheless, most people still die behind the closed doors of a hospital, hospice, or nursing home in the United States and other wealthier countries. When death is hidden or treated as an unknown, we don't learn how to talk about it within our families, or know how and when we should talk about it with our children. And furthermore, when and how our children should talk about it with their grandparents or great-grandparents. Every person experiences the loss of loved ones and will face the reality of their own death, and yet most of us don't know how to talk about it. There are many benefits to talking about death and dying before you or someone you love faces death. These include relieving stress, allowing more peaceful conversations, and helping all involved become more ready for when death and dying come. Joining us today is Dr. Natalie Rodden, a palliative care physician practicing in Denver, Colorado. Natalie, welcome to Vital Signs.
Thank you, Tom. It's so wonderful to be here and a real pleasure to be able to share some information that I hope will be helpful to the listeners and watchers of this episode.
Natalie, when you were younger, did you have difficulty talking about death and dying? And if so, how did you get beyond it?
I think I definitely did, Tom. And it was something that is a topic that I found unnatural or kind of unnerving to talk about. And I feel that most other people probably share that same situation. I had a situation when I was about 10 where my grandfather got quite sick and he passed away. And then 3 months later, my grandmother passed away, his wife. And so as a young girl, that was very influential, I think, for me, and having death so present in my life and to be able to think about death's role as a natural part of life. And it probably impacted my choice of career to be a palliative care doctor, where I care for people who often can't be fixed or cured, who have serious medical problems, and to help them and their families as they prepare for living the best life with these illnesses, and then ultimately preparing for the end of life and what death is going to look like for them.
That's a beautiful story, Natalie. What do you think it is that makes death such an uncomfortable subject to talk about?
I think that so much in our culture and society today views death as something that is quite has a stigma to it, and it's something that is the enemy to be avoided at all costs. And we think about that in our healthcare system, as we can do a lot with medical technology to ward off death or to fix or to cure things that in decades past would not have been compatible with living for so long. And so I think that has just become so prevalent in being a conversation that we wish to avoid. And that's just really a tragedy, because death is a part of life for everyone. It's inevitable. We are mortal. And so when we ignore this part of our existence as human beings, it can make for a very traumatic and stressful time when one's mortality does come up and one is diagnosed with a difficult illness or nearing end of life. And so I think it's great that we're talking about that today.
And so, what do you think are the benefits of talking about death and dying before our viewers are in a situation where they're facing death or dying themselves or with somebody else? In other words, what's the motivation to do something about it now?
I think that having conversations with your families when things are calm and you aren't in a crisis can be a true gift to your family members if, God forbid, ever something happened to you. And so, if you're able to sit down together and talk about your values and talk about what's important to you regarding your life and what a good death would look like for you or what you would want around the circumstances of your death, even things like, I want to be comfortable and I want to be home and I want to have a priest come visit me and things like that. They can be such gifts to families to have direction around that. And there are some guides that are available and out there, some things like the Conversation Project. You can find this online, or a 5 Wishes document. And these can be helpful guides because it may seem intimidating even to broach these topics with your loved ones. And so these kind of things gently guide you through questions and topics that may be relevant just to casually talk about, to help everyone get on the same page about your health and about what you would like to happen if your health worsened.
Natalie, you're around people every day who are near the end of life, and you see them with family members and friends. What is it like in those rooms when those people are with the patients and they have not prepared by talking about death before this time?
It honestly is very challenging to watch and to witness because there's a big difference between caring for a family who has thoughtfully considered what they would like their end of life to be like for this family member and for a family member and their family who hasn't. I think that there's so many difficult emotions that can come up, like denial and anger and excess grief and not feeling at peace. I've seen sometimes there be so much conflict that comes up just because different family members have different visions on what their loved one would want. And their loved one might be in a state where they can't speak for themselves. And so there can be a lot of discord, and it can just add so much excess stress to a situation that is already stressful. And so I feel that these kind of conversations are just so important to have as best you can beforehand.
And how are you able to help some of these families over the hump to talk about the difficult topics?
I really try to normalize the situation and help take away the stigma and just help guide them through it. So, a lot of times in a palliative care consultation, for example, I'll just get to know who the patient is and what are their values. What's the most important thing to them? Is it their faith? Is it their family? Is it being able to be active and care for their grandchildren or to go fishing? What is it that really is important to them? And then how do I translate those values into the medical decisions that are being up for them to discern, up for them to decide upon? And it's really helpful to kind of work through that with the families there too. I try to include as many family members in these conversations as I can so that we can kind of talk about best case scenarios and worst case scenarios. And I like to say that we're hoping for the best in every situation for this patient, but it's also important that we prepare for the worst. And as difficult as it is, having these conversations will help provide much guidance later on if they ever need to be called upon.
I like it that as a physician, you're not just asking what's the matter with the patient, but you're asking what matters most to the patient. I think that's a beautiful way to be as a physician. Now, when you're talking to some of these people who will soon die, how can you help their family members to start to hope for a good death instead of hoping for a cure, especially when there might be family members doing the full court press, trying to do every treatment possible to save the physical life?
I think that there's a lot of care that we can give to the family members. In palliative care, we like to say that we care for the patient and everyone who loves the patient. And there's so much stress that a chronic or serious illness has on the people that love someone. And primarily for the caregiver. There is so much caregiver stress associated with these diseases. And sometimes the caregiver themselves might be at worse health because they haven't been able to take time for themselves to go to the doctor or to get their own medical care. And they're very, very stressed. And so often their whole identity in life might be caring for this loved one who is getting worse in their health. And how are they going to be able to find their identity when this loved one has died? And so sometimes it's very difficult for them to come to terms that this death of this loved one might be occurring soon. And so I try to really spend time with them and love them and help them to understand that it's nothing reflective on the care that they've been giving the patient, that the patient's life is probably nearing its end because their body is tiring out, is weakening, and the disease has advanced to some degree. And so I just work together and give space and give time for them to come to terms with things and to work through it together with my team. And that's why I'm really grateful that in the fields of palliative care and hospice, we have social workers and chaplains, because there's so much more than just physical suffering that's going on in these sort of scenarios, but a lot of other ways that we can help the patient and their loved ones in a holistic manner.
I really get what you say about caregiver stress. Every day I operate on patients in their 70s, 80s, and 90s to remove cancers on their face. And for them, it's a day off because they are that caregiver, often for someone with dementia. That is less stressful than caring for that person. So God bless you for helping out the families. Now, when we talk about important conversations, we also have conversations with someone who might be your medical decision maker if you're not able to. At what point should somebody start talking with their medical decision maker, their durable power of attorney, and what specific items should they discuss?
I honestly feel it's never too early to designate who would be your medical durable power of attorney. In some states, there is someone that automatically can be designated if you haven't chosen someone. And in other states, you have to actually choose someone. And I think it's important that you think about who would want to speak for you if you couldn't speak for yourself. Who would be able to calmly and clearly be able to express your wishes, not what they want for you. And so the only way they're really going to know your wishes is if you take the time to share with them. And so being really clear with them on, this is my faith, these are my beliefs, this is what I'd want my care to look like, this is important to my values. This is something that I think everyone should talk about with their loved ones, no matter what their age, because tragedy can strike in an instant. But if you have a chronic illness, or you go to the hospital a lot, or you find that you're having some early memory loss, those are other scenarios that I think it's particularly important to have these conversations and get your advance directives in order so that you and your families can have more peace if they ever need to be utilized.
Let's talk about children. What are some good ways to introduce children to the topic of death at various ages? And might we as Catholics use certain times of the year to do this, like Good Friday, the feast day of the Assumption, or even the feast day of a martyr?
I love using the liturgical calendar to help illustrate parts of life and different things of meaning. So I think those are great ideas, Tom. But as far as speaking to children about death, I think that just to help normalize it to them is the most important. Even taking a trip to a cemetery around All Souls Day or during the month of November and thinking about death and life and death are part of life. And it's important to be direct with your language with children, to say the word died. I think that using euphemisms or vague language like your friend's grandmother passed away or fell asleep and didn't wake up or things like that could really cause fear and confusion for children who have more of a literal understanding. And so they may be afraid to go to sleep or something because they don't know what's going to happen to them. And so I think just as being clear and direct and sharing that this is normal to life would be all helpful things in how to approach this with children.
That sounds really practical, Natalie. How about forgiveness? What is the importance of forgiveness at the end of life, both being forgiven and forgiving others?
I don't think I could say enough about how important it is because nearing the end of life is a period of such opportunity for healing and mending of relationships and growth in those relationships. There's a famous book by Ira Byock that talks about the four last things. And he mentions four different things you should say to your loved ones before the end of life. And it's, I forgive you, I'm sorry, I thank you, and I love you. And in his studies as a palliative care doctor, these are areas where there needs to be healing and growth. And if there's and these are areas that, if addressed, can give so much peace to loved ones and to family members. And I really recommend being open to discussing these sort of topics, as difficult as they might be, because it will only help you later after that person has passed.
From forgiveness, let's move on to regret. How can the sick and their family members have conversations to prevent a sense of regret? In other words, what do family members most often regret saying or not saying once their family members died?
I think that there's never a lost opportunity to say, I love you. That's very important. And I honestly tell families to love that person and to say what they need to say. And we believe that even if a person is less coherent or is getting more demented or confused, even if they're not communicating and they're on a ventilator, being able to hear, we believe, still is intact until a patient dies. And so saying what you need to say and being honest with your loved one is very important. And if you don't know how much time this loved one has left, I say just seize the day and have joyful experiences with them. Don't have regrets. So if you need to celebrate Christmas and it's in the middle of the summer and your loved one loved Christmas and they're going to die soon, then you get out the Christmas tree. If you want to have your loved one's favorite meal, if you want to listen to their favorite music, do what you need to do. Celebrate their life. Create a legacy. Have opportunities to record them speaking or take photos together. Don't lose these special opportunities to continue to grow and heal and love one another, even when time might be limited.
That is beautiful advice. Now, going from joy to suffering, how can we meaningfully talk to these patients about suffering or let them talk about their suffering in a way that they feel you'll want to listen to?
I will tell you that our faith teaches some of the most beautiful things about suffering. And it was modeled by Pope St. John Paul II and in the way that he suffered to us. And he wrote on suffering. And there's some beautiful church documents on the salvific or saving nature of suffering and how we can unify any suffering we have to Christ's suffering. Yet it's hard. And if any of us, as we watch this video, or know when you're in the midst of suffering, it's hard sometimes to think about offering that up or uniting that to Christ, as we all strive to. And I've had many patients that are challenged in that way. And so I think that being honest about how you are hurting and being honest about how suffering might not just be physical, but it could be emotional or spiritual suffering or mental suffering, and telling that to your medical team is important so that we can address all those different areas. Because as a palliative care doctor, that's my goal. I want to help decrease your suffering in any way I can so that you live the best life possible. And I think this is hard with our culture today, which says that we need to destroy suffering at all costs, to where we would actually destroy the patient. We would actually harm the patient by something like physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. And that is absolutely not what I hold true or what we believe as Catholics. But we can very much manage the suffering of the symptom control and managing to help support the patient while not destroying the patient themselves or the sufferer.
In your work in palliative care, and you clearly see joy and suffering and death in a really Catholic way, Natalie. What is the source of joy for you as the physician taking care of these patients and their families?
It's very unexpected to most people to hear that I find this work so joyful, but it truly is. It is an awesome gift to be able to see patients at this time in their lives and to witness the beauty of their life. I had someone share with me once that this kind of work was like caring for, if you think about a patient at the end of their life is like reached the pinnacle of growth and they are like a leaf in fall. It's the most beautiful colors just before it's about to fall off a tree, or a sun in the sky at the end of a day is so full of color and beauty before it sets beyond the horizon. And that's often what I see in palliative care, to see how patients are so strong, to see the beauty of the life they've lived, to see the love among spouses who've been together for 60 plus years, for multiple generations of family members. And I learn from my patients all the time. It was definitely a shift from medical training where I was learning how to fix and cure and help people back to health, when I oftentimes can't do that in palliative care. But how I can help reduce suffering to help people improve their life, to live the best life possible, despite illness, and to keep having beautiful opportunities of growth and life, that is a true gift. And I couldn't imagine doing any other type of work.
Natalie, what final thoughts would you like to leave with our viewers about talking about death and dying?
I would say do not be afraid to have the courage to do this and to lean on our faith. There's so many beautiful things in the Catholic Church. The letter on suffering that John Paul II wrote, called Salve Vici Doloris, is a beautiful document, and you can find that on the Vatican website, easily accessible online. And even this past year, the Vatican put out a document called Samaritanus Bonus, which is translated as the Good Samaritan. And it talks through a lot of features around end of life and suffering and what our church teaches around these topics.
Natalie, thank you for these many practical tips. This has been incredible. I think our viewers are going to glean a lot from this that they can use. And thank you to our viewers for watching this episode of Vital Signs, your prescription for a healthy family, brought to you by Shalom World TV, the Catholic Medical Association, where we are inspiring physicians to imitate Jesus Christ. Please join us for our next episode and share the good news of Vital Signs with a friend, and may God bless you. I encourage everyone to send us emails with questions that you want to ask medical experts. Please email us at vitalsigns@shalomworld.org. Your questions and comments will help us determine what topics we'll cover in the next season of Vital Signs.
Someone who's used media a lot in evangelization, so I believe in the importance of Catholic radio, Catholic TV, Catholics using the new media. Can I encourage everyone to watch Shalom TV? I think it's a great vehicle of evangelization. And God bless all of you.